Hey everyone, it's Mark Hayward from the Absolute Business Mindset podcast and YouTube channel. Thank you very much for joining me. Today, we have Peter Scrivener, who is an ex-rugby player who used to play for Wasps in rugby union and England as well. It was one of my favorite interviews. I've known Peter for a very long time. He used to go to the same school as me. And I really just want to really promote this video because I had a lot of fun. We talk a lot about business, a lot about being a rugby player, starting in rugby, early days in rugby, and right at the cusp of when rugby union went professional, and we talk about what's happening to the business side of rugby at the moment. He has been a rugby player. He's been in business. He's set up his own businesses now. He had a really tough time through COVID as well. So it's really, really going to be interesting if you want to hear about what a professional player is like in sport, and equally someone that has been through the mill as well. So it's really important that you guys enjoy this, and I hope you are enjoying it. If you are enjoying this, please do give it a thumbs up. Please do give it a like. Please do subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it. It makes a huge impact if you do subscribe as well. And if you've got any comments about the podcast or about anyone that you would like me to speak to, then please do leave it in the comments below. Thank you so much and enjoy the interview. Today we have Peter Scrivener, who's a former professional rugby player and now director of PRS Promotions. Hello, Peter. How are you today?
Yeah, all good. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. The first question, the podcast is called Absolute Business Mindset. So I ask all of my guests as the first question, what does a business mindset mean to you?
Do you know what? It's one of those things for me where I worked many years ago for Wasps. I was a rugby player to start off with, straight from university. So that spent 12 years. But for me, you just got to be positive in everything you do because business is very difficult at whatever level you're at, whether it's starting out in a firm or you're working as an entrepreneur. It's just a challenge every single day to balance what is right, what is wrong, and learning by your mistakes. Mistakes are key, and God, yeah, I've made loads, as pretty much every businessman has, but it's just making sure you don't repeat them. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That not repeating. So I worked in corporate for a long time, and I was told for 14 years, and I was told you're allowed to make a mistake, but you don't do the same mistake again. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's key to life in general, isn't it? So you got to learn from everything you do and just not repeat it.
Absolutely. All right. Tell me one thing about your upbringing which reflects on who you are today.
Well, like you, we're from a similar background. My school in Essex was Cooper's, my senior school. My junior school was the Bell School. I'm not sure where did you go? Junior school.
Oh, I lived in Dagenham, so I was outside of Havering. So I went to a school called Monteagle, but I think I was probably about 14 or 15 when you went professional. So you were sort of like 5 years, 4 or 5 years ahead of me on there. But I just, this is quite a funny little story. I just remember one time you sitting in where the PE teachers were, you sitting there in all of your Wasps regalia, all your kit and stuff, and sort of sitting there chatting to the kids. And I just thought it was such a lovely, like, reflecting on it, it was such a lovely thing that you still felt connected to the school, and you would come back and talk to some of the kids who were playing rugby and aspire to be rugby players.
It was massive. I think any sportsman, whatever level you get to, I was fortunate enough to get to a level where, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of hard work, but I didn't get that international cap due to pretty much every part of my body falling off. But those individuals that can come, whether it's sport, whether it's business, that can come back to any school and just talk to the children that they're developing their sort of loves and wishes, aspirations, and you've got to give it back. And if you don't give it back, then it's just, I think it's just shocking. I've just watched the Shaq documentary. I don't know if you've seen it. It's just incredible. And it is about helping others succeed. There's nothing better than seeing someone if you've helped them, really, strive to be the best they can be. And I think as any parent, you want your kids to be better than you. Simple as that. And going back to the school, my school Coopers in effect gave me everything. It gave me that grounding from the day I walked through those doors at 11 years old. And I really do thank all those staff that put the hours into not just my education but my sport, because that school, the amount of time the teachers put over and above on the basketball camps, the rugby camps, the cricket, the athletics, the tennis, everything. It was incredible. And I was very fortunate to have very supportive parents. Dad is still with us, Mum's not, but they travelled everywhere, to follow me, whether it was for the school or the county or Eastern Counties or England. When I was a schoolboy international, they went everywhere. So for me, the grounding, I had very supportive parents, but I also had a very supportive school. And you look back on all the teachers that help you in any school. You've got to have that one or two teachers that sees the potential and helps you. And that's what a great teacher does. So.
Yeah, and I think sadly teachers are being underrated on pay, and what they do for their kids is super important for the next generation, and they should, like, there's lots of people that should be valued higher. Nurses, for instance, another example of people that should be rated higher on pay and various things. It's a very tough job, but I've got two young kids myself, and they go to a good school, and it's just so nice to see parents and teachers and head teachers engaged and really wanting to help the children develop and be able to aspire. They're 7 and 9, so they're still very young, but just building those kids ready for secondary school at the moment it's just so important. I think we don't value teachers enough, sadly. I want to ask you, before you went and started your professional rugby career, you spent 10 months as a trading assistant at Merrill Lynch. So that was sort of, that was after university, was it?
Yeah, no, that was part of university. So my uni degree was business study, or economics and business finance. It was at Brunel. God, I have to switch my head on for that one. But I had a 4-year course, and the year 3 was a time where I could go out for a year and spend time in business, which I think is a really valued piece. I think a lot of the kids with COVID it was a bit different, because I think a lot of those kids that were at university during that time, it's a complete waste of time, really.
Yeah.
But for me, I went back to Merrill Lynch in my 3rd year for 6 months. They were really good to us, and there were a couple of Wasp fans there as well, which was brilliant. Wasp season ticket holders. So when I walked through the door, I was welcomed and really helped. And you look at those sliding door moments where you think, you know what, I could have gone that route, and who knows where I'd be now, but I could have gone that route. But the head traders there were tough. It showed me what an office environment was about, and I was in the office at that time at about 7 o'clock in the morning with the traders in there, and it was fascinating, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then I went back to Coopers so I did 6 months there, and then the other 6 months did it Coopers with Nick Eddivine. I don't know if you remember Eddie.
Yeah.
And we were effectively teaching assistants, and I was doing a bit of economics with the sixth form on workshops, but mainly helping out in the sports department. And it was just, I loved that as well. It was so much fun. So I look back on that sort of not gap year, but sort of placement year as a real steep learning curve on both in the city and also at school. So I had the best of both worlds.
All right. So you signed as a professional rugby player just after university. What was it like the first day you walked into Wasps as a professional player, your first day?
Well, it was so if you go back a little bit, so when I represented England under 18s, and that period, I was probably one of 3 out of the whole squad which were comprehensive lads, and it was just, we had a great team: Andy Gomersall, Johnny Ufton, Nick Greenstock, and the list went on. Really, really good side.
Yeah.
And yeah, we got picked up, or I got picked up at Wasps at 18. So when I first went to Wasps, and I should have gone to Saracens, and because that was literally just 25 minutes down the road from me. But there was a guy called Jeff Strange who just kept phoning me every single day for about 3 months saying, look, you've got to come to Wasps, you've got to come to Wasps. And I was like, no, I'm going to Saracens. John Davis wants me at Saracens, and Dick Rose was there, and Sean O'Leary, Eugene O'Hurley, and great Campion lads. But I went to Wasps one Thursday night, and then I just literally fell in love with that club. And I was very fortunate to be one of those players that spent my whole career there. But so I was there anyway from 18 to sort of 21. When I came out of university, I'd signed my first pro contract then, so I knew the lads anyway, and the game went pro as I was there, before. But I went to Quins, and I got asked to go there, and my first salary, Dick Best was the director of rugby then, and he offered me 25 grand to play there, which was a huge amount of money for a sort of a 21-year-old at that time. But I was on a £1,250 win bonus. So Wasps at that time were very successful. So when we did, I was always going to stay at Wasps, and Nigel Melville, and I think Rob Smith was the DOR at the time. He signed me for the same terms. And then we'd be very successful. So as a young kid, I was going home with a lot of money per month. But looking back on things, like hindsight is wonderful. Christ, rather than going down to Fulham with Simon Shaw, Kenny Logan, and the rest of the squad, because we were all single, apart from Andy Reid and Damien Cronin. Maybe we should have invested into a lot of houses and stuff like that, because Shane Royser at the time, he bought a place in Canary Wharf, and we were all going, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is completely bonkers. Shane's a dentist anyway, and he's very successful, but he did very well from that property. But I can't grumble, because I'm very fortunate to be sitting where I'm sitting now. But that first day it was when it went pro. You went from training on Tuesday and Thursday night to training during the day, and it was a boy's own dream, because it was crazy. You're getting paid to do something that you regarded as a hobby. Then you got a lot stronger, because you're doing weights every day. The whole ethos of that pro setup changed. Your diet, your nutrition, everything was monitored. So it was exciting times as a 21-year-old. Great times.
And so I'm a big fan of rugby still. Unfortunately for this conversation, I'm a Harlequins fan, so please don't hold it against me. But who was the person that you admired the most as an opposition player? That probably people that you played against, as in the direct role that you played. Who was the person that you admired the most?
There were a number of people that I was very fortunate to play against, but the two that stand out, Dean Richards and Zinzan Brook. So Zinny is still a great pal, and every time I see Dean, we always share moments. But those two were just incredible. But then you look right the way back. Mike Teague when he's playing for Gloucester. Will Carlin. I was in that England squad with all those guys, Rob Andrew, and it was just. It was. I was 20, 21 when I first sort of entered that England squad environment, and I never forget going into the hotel, and Jack Rowell was manager at the time, and he goes, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, you must know because you picked me." So and that was my first sort of meeting with Jack and those teams, and then you look at the players I played with, Lawrence Dallaglio, Simon Shaw, Kenny Logan, Rob Henderson, and then you look back at Wasps as well. Christ, you've got Paul Rendell, Jeff Probyn. The list was unbelievable.
Wasps were such a dominant team in that era, though, weren't they? They were always winning the first division, often doing really well in Europe. They were like the players you've just reeled off. That for me is like they're heroes of mine when I was growing up. Of these people, How do you sort of get like the myth of the like Lawrence Dallaglio or some of these guys that the top of their game, absolute Rob Andrew, Will Carlin. How do you as a youngster sort of try and fit in with these absolute legends of the game while you're playing in the same team or playing against them?
I think it all comes down to the respect you have for them and the respect you have for you as a professional person. You know, I went into that team very early on at Wasps. I was very fortunate, but they looked after me. So and you know, the respect works both ways. So you know, I knew how great they were, and they regarded me as a player that they could trust, and that for me was everything. So, and I just love being in that environment. Yes, it was pressurized, and you know, I never forget my first ever. I think I was 19 at the time. First, I think it was the first term I was out of Cooper's, and Paul Hardman phoned up and he goes, "Where are you?" And I said, "You won't believe this. I'm in Saint-Jean-de-Luz with the Wasps first team." And he goes, "Shut up." And I said, "No, I am." And I reeled off all the players that I was with. And that was a learning curve. I was initiated into the back row club of Wasps, which is quite scary at the time when you got likes of Francis Emmerich and those boys. It's scary, but they look after you. And the fact that family of Wasps still continues now. You know, I created the Wasp Legends charity 11, 12 years ago, and those boys are still very much part of what we do on a daily basis. And you know, it's Damien Cronin's birthday today, and there probably been about 250 messages wishing him happy birthday from that Legends family. And a Wasp legend is anyone that's worn a shirt. So it doesn't matter whether you're a professional or an amateur. If you've worn a Wasp shirt at any level, you know, you are a Wasp legend, and that's what's special about our charity, because it's inclusive for all.
Absolutely, that sounds fantastic. Just on that professional, so you were right on the cusp when rugby went professional, and when I've listened and watched documentaries of those people that sort of straddled both the amateur era and the professional era, they said almost like when it ticked over to the new season when they became professional. Obviously, it's not just a one day, but the amount of time spent. So you were doing other jobs, you were doing a full-time job and then coming to train for your rugby club, and then that changeover from into the professional era. Do you think that obviously it's grown the business of rugby, it's grown the community of rugby, it's built up and you got better players getting better all the time? Do you ever think about the amateur era in a nostalgic way, thinking that things were in a way better that way because things were a little bit more simple?
I think yes and no. So yeah, the amateur. I'm still involved in the amateur game anyway. So I live in Caldy. So I've got two clubs in my life. One is Wasps and one is Caldy. Caldy are in the championship, but they were an amateur side and they've done very, very well coming up the leagues. Do they want to go any further? No, I don't think so. Yeah, Wasps on the other hand is slightly different, and we'll probably touch on that a bit later. But I just think that era from going from amateur to professional, where there was about 9 of us that were fully pros. The rest of the team at the time did have jobs in the city. They were surveyors, so they were training on a Tuesday and Thursday night. So our training sort of at the start of pro rugby was sort of a Monday morning, maybe weights, and then we'd go in on the Tuesday night to meet up with the boys that did have jobs, and that did get phased out in the end. You know, do I think the game is better now? I think of course it is. But the RFU and PRL have got a lot of work to do, because currently the world of rugby, the financial model that relies on wealthy benefactors, it's broken. You know, unless you're a billionaire and you're happy to lose 5-6 million quid a year, then you know this is the game to be in. But you know that model is unsustainable, and there's a lot of pressure on Premiership rugby currently as a sustainable model for the future. So you know, I think what people have got to realise is that these clubs that are paying players, you've got to have a sustainable model, whatever level you're at. A sustainable model that still keeps the ethos and rugby, and why people play rugby on a Saturday afternoon. For the camaraderie, the fun, the post match beers, but a level of competitiveness that you enjoy week in, week out. Now, whether that is for Wasps' fifth team or Bishop Stortford fifth team, right the way up to the sort of top level, in the championship, because you've only got probably 3 or 4 teams that are fully pro in that championship. The rest of them are semi-pro. And if you look at Caldy, a fantastic set of boys, a fantastic crowd. We get 2,500 there every single week. And we're the third highest supported team in the championship, where unfortunately we have Ealing, who are the super bunch of lads, on a budget of probably about 6.5 million a year. They can't go up. They haven't got the infrastructure to go up. But when they came to us, they lost, and that's what the beauty of rugby is. It's it's a leveler on all sorts of things. So do I miss the amateur days? Not really, because I only lapped over probably about 2 or 3 years, and then I was fully pro. So we were one of the first year group that went pro. Well, we were the first year group, 1995. But it's rugby's in a tricky situation at the minute on development, on safety, and we'll maybe touch on concussion a bit later. But there's lots of things that the game needs to sort out, and one of them is a sustainable model to protect everyone.
So just on that, so when I've done some reading and I follow the rugby story quite well, quite a lot, and you've got Premiership teams like Wasps, like Worcester have gone into administration. You've got the rest of the league in the English Premiership, which are most of them are in significant debt. You got the issue of Wales that they've struggled being able to make agreements. Where do you see sort of rugby moving to have to be that sustainable business where they can make profit rather than, as you said, like lose 5 or 6 million a year, and they need that benefactor? How do you see that transition? Let's talk about England specifically first of all. How do you see that England are able to do that with clubs like Wasps coming back and equally people like London Irish who are in a lot of debt as well?
I think that's probably another 2 weeks of a podcast that you've got there. It's not an easy fix. It went professional in 1995, and really the game's not moved forward commercially. Really, if you look at it, because you're still relying on these wealthy benefactors to prop the game up. Whether the game should have gone central contracts, when it had the chance to right at the start. Because they did try to do that. Who knows? I think that question is definitely for another time, because it's so messed up in a minute. If you look at Tony Rowe, who owns Exeter, he's just had to pump £6 million into to the club to effectively stave off possible administration. I say that very lightly, because all this stems from all the DCMS loans during COVID that now have to be repaid. So there's a lot of pressure on Irish, as you mentioned. Leicester was the big one that was nearly forced into administration. Peter Toms and another investor rescued it with putting £13 million in. So it's a very difficult one.
Yeah, and it's you see people like Ireland that seem to have it sorted, seem to have it organised, but with central contracts and having that control. And we've also seen this in cricket. I love cricket as well. The fact that they've been able to centrally contract their England players, and England are driving the agenda when it comes to their England players playing and how regularly they play and supporting them. Do you think it would lose something if they were centrally contracted and not playing week in, week out for their Premiership teams as well? Do you think it would lose something for the Premiership?
100%. So this is the balance that you've got to make, and that the powers that be got to discuss, because is the structure of the league and the global calendar correct? Probably not. You've got situations where when I was commercial director of Wasps, you'd have all your stars there for 4 weeks, and then they disappear for 6 weeks, and you're trying to keep a product a lot alive, kicking, value to supporters. And when your star team are not there, so it's like, in any business that you work in, even if you work in, IBM, if you take your top programmers and everything else out, your senior management out of that firm for 6 weeks, it's gonna cause a few issues, and that's what happens in rugby at the minute. But on the flip side, the positive is that those young players that are sitting on the sidelines have the opportunity to step up and show their worth in those periods where the internationals are happening. So I think there's a lot of things across the whole of the rugby landscape that potentially needs to change, upgrade, and and the powers that be have to sort that out. The likes of me and you discussing and making change it just won't happen. So. But yeah, it's a model that cannot continue because clubs have to be sustainable, and if they're not, then it's crazy.
Yeah, it's a massive challenge, and I think it's happening all over the world. It's not just an England thing. So, and how do you see? Well, I want to talk to you about being a commercial director at Wasps Rugby, but just on the sort of current rugby. So there's been a lot of talk about how successful French rugby teams are with it on the European level, and obviously France are doing very well as a nation as well, and them not having caps, wage caps, and trying to pull, or they're pulling a lot of English players towards the French rugby. How do you sort of see? Is this just a cyclical thing that France are on the ascendancy at the moment, and I suppose Ireland as well are on the ascendancy, but specifically France? How do you see the lack of wage cap for them, and sort of the impact that it's having on European rugby across the board?
Yeah, well, it's just simple economics. If you've got a team that's worth 9 million quid, that's just saying a team that's worth 5 million quid, you can't compete. So when you've got 15 lads on the pitch that are all internationals, and then suddenly your bench comes on, and they are also world-class internationals, and the UK's the English bench isn't, and they're young players, up and coming players, you're always going to struggle, and that's what's happening with that French model. And the French actually have got a very good sustainable club model. And you look at the French team, they're doing brilliant. But what niggles me is that, why is that a French team so good? Yeah, they've got some good players, but they've got some of the world's best coaches as well. And one of them's English.
Yeah.
So, to allow Sean to be coaching, Sean Edwards to be coaching, for a foreign power, as we say, if you can say, I just think it's shocking. And the same with Ireland, where you look at Farrell and his support staff, English. Then you look at the Welsh, Warren Gatland, who's very successful at Wasps. He's back in charge. He's got a big job there. But the support staff under Warren, a lot of them are very young English talented coaches, and they were, again, a lot of them were at Wasps. So has England got that right model? To allow Eddie Jones to go off to one of our biggest competitors with no exclusions on his contract, who he can work with, and non-compete clauses, etc., etc. Go into Australia, probably give him every single bit of information about our internal workings as a rugby union, is utterly unbelievable. Would never happen in any other business. And we're playing them potentially in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. So unbelievable. So again, I think we could spend hours on English rugby. One person you should have a chat to is Simon Halliday, because that would be a very interesting podcast, because he's got some very interesting views and strong views about the development of the game, especially as he was chair of European rugby, and now he's involved as consultant at Ealing and with the championship. So
what I'm being careful, which is actually a relatively easy thing to do, but I don't think it's particularly productive, is we could just sit here and bash the English RFU that they've done things wrong, and they've made mistakes, and they've pushed Eddie Jones out. Whether you liked him towards the end or not is a different matter. But as you say, not having an exclusion that he can't go to, they seem to be making pretty schoolboy era mistakes and not being particularly well structured. That is probably a whole hour-long conversation about the RFU, the structure and how it's run, etc. But so I do want to move on. I want to talk about some of the other areas of your life that you've been. So when you retired, you went as a commercial director to Wasps Rugby. So you were dealing with all of the commercial revenues that were at Wasps. So that transition into that role, what was your priority at that time as a commercial director?
Well, it's actually if you go back a stage, my first role out of rugby was working for a company called tickets.com, which was the ticketing solution for Major League Baseball. So that was my first role. And the reason I got into that is my old CEO at Wasps, Simon Crane, was the CEO of tickets.com, and he got me that opportunity. And I went in there and used my contacts and successfully sold that ticketing platform into a number of sports entities all around the world. Then John O'Connell, who was chairman, and Chris Wright of Wasps at the time phoned up and said, "Look, we want you to apply for this role." And going back into Wasps as commercial director was like a dream job, actually, and it was a bit of a risk for John and Chris because I knew all the players, but that actually probably was a strength. So my first few days going in there, is looking at every single bit of commercial income coming into the club, and actually just restructuring how the club was run, because it wasn't run in a particularly professional way when I sort of went in there, because the tracking of all the commercial monies and people doing staff doing jobs that it was all mismatched. And our CEO at the time, David Davis, brought a chap in who did a complete sort of cleanse and restructure of the whole system, which was really actually very clever, actually, and listed every single process of every single job that the club did. And you then put those processes in the right scenario, in the right job description, and then you see actually what you are doing. Have you got too many people? Are you being as effective as you can? So my job in those days was to bring the most money into that club as possible. I was very fortunate because we had a fantastic team as well. So 2005 we were still punching brilliantly. We won the Heineken Cup in 2007. So fans were coming to Adams Park week in, week out to see some excellent rugby. And the one thing, coming back to that era as well, the one game, what one game sold out immediately at Adams Park in that league. Could you name a team that Wasps played someone and it automatically sells out? And it was all to do with one player.
I'm guessing, because at that time Leicester were huge. No,
Newcastle. Johnny Wilkinson.
Oh, right. Okay.
Literally, as soon as that Newcastle fixture was announced, that was sold out corporally,
Really?
and right the way through to every single seat. And Johnny, fair play to him, every time he came, he was absolutely superb. Signed every single autograph, spoke to everyone, brilliant. So, and that's that. And he, if you look at the epitomizer a professional player. He was it, and he still, he struggled with certain aspects of his life, trying to sort of I can't even say the word, actually trying to get his game into and his head into the right position. So he was, he'd go kicking on Christmas Day, and if you speak to him now, he'd say probably went too far on certain aspects of his life, but. That was the time, and that's why he was so successful. He was the best, and he's a super lad. Absolutely.
So let's just touch on mental health. It's something that I'm very much an advocate for. What's been your experience about mental health? I'm thinking specifically from the retiring age. Did you struggle after retiring as a professional rugby player and sort of getting back into sort of, put in inverted commas, normal life?
I was lucky, but I completely understand it now, because when you look back on things, and the euphoria of and this goes for every sport. So the euphoria of playing in front of 10, 20, 30, 50, 100,000 people, whatever sport you're in around the world, then suddenly it stops.
Yeah.
That is when things can be very tough. Now, during my career, I say I was fortunate, but out of a 12-year career, I was injured for 5. So during my 5 years of 2 knees, 2 shoulders, and all sorts of other things fell off, I threw myself into the commercial side of the club. So during my periods of rehab, I was doing the press office, I was helping host events, I was on the radio. So a real mixture. So when I sort of came out of my sort of the end of the career, I got picked up with a job literally straight away. So because commercially I was already talking to, even though I didn't realise it, I was already talking to a lot of corporates in that world. And I talked to the lads currently. I was on the phone to Jack Willis yesterday, giving him just a congratulations for signing against Toulouse, and I just literally said to him, look, be very careful with your money. So try to even if you get paid £500,000 a year, don't spend £500,000. Be sensible. Live to a sensible lifestyle, and that money just bank it. If you can come out of rugby with £2 million in the bank, you've done it. And that's I look back on my time, and I did have a very good financial advisor. My father was very sensible, but at times I wasn't. And we'd go down the pub at the weekends, and you blow a few £100 on booze, and you think, Christ, that could have been a mortgage in so and so. But again, hindsight is great. So the mental health side of things, a lot of players do struggle to, when they come out of rugby or out of sport, to adjust to normal life. And these guys have to plan for the future, and it's the job of the unions to help the players, but also the player really has to help themselves to look at the future, because it could end tomorrow. For me, the one person that I think epitomizes just an incredible future, and it started from absolute desperation, was Tom Rees. One of the best talents that you could possibly come across for England rugby, future England captain, etc., etc. Does his knee, and now he's a doctor. So he is someone that I look to and go, Christ, absolutely amazing. But then there's the trade-off. So a lot of the lads that are in the Wasp network now are coming, so they're retiring. That they didn't choose to go to professional rugby. They chose to stay in their jobs. Some of those guys are very, very successful and retired from some of the biggest companies in the world, and they've done it, and they've had the payouts, and they're very happy. But I think the lads that are coming out now, they have to be. You've got to prepare for the future, and that also has to sit with the agents. It has to sit with the player. It has to sit with the club and help these players look at their future, and sustainably.
Something that's obviously incredibly important, working 18 years as a trustee for Wasps Legends Charitable Foundation. So tell me a little bit about what you do in the foundation and how you help.
So we set that up. When I was commercial director, we launched something called the Past Players Network, which was basically and I'll be very honest, it was a way to bring all the old boys back into Wasps and commercially generate income from that network, because they were very affluent. And we played a couple of exhibition games in Guernsey. One of the lads over there, Brian Carew, who's a top man. He worked for a company called the Heritage Group, which is a big insurance company out there. They said, look, can you bring a team over? We did, and we took a phenomenal team over, and we had the most amazing weekend. You put that black shirt on, look down at your top, and you think, you're back together. And those 20 years you've been apart, you're suddenly back into that team environment. And it was just a very funny weekend. But we raised about £30,000 for good causes on that day. That then blossomed to a couple of games a year. And then in 2011, I wasn't happy where where we went to one club, and I wasn't happy where the money was going. So I said, look, let's formulate this charity, which I did with a chap called Paul Clements. super chap. He was my sensible head. He was a lawyer, and one of the old boys. And we created the charity, and the foundation has been going great guns ever since. Sue Martineau is our new CEO. Toby works with us now as well, who runs all our events and commercials. And we are a pure foundation that gives money to great projects that the WASP family nominate, our trustees, and look at those, put it back to a shortlist and put it back to the members, and they vote accordingly. But over the years, we've done School of Hard Knocks, Muscle Help Foundation, Motor Neurons Disease, My Name Doddy. The list goes on. Built like a health centre for Serge Betsen's Academy in Cameroon. That was a great one. But it's inclusive for all. So it's not just the men; the women are involved as well, who are great fun. And if you look actually at our ladies section, they're more famous than we are, because they've got IRB Players of the World. I don't think we've got one of those. So I know we've got some great players, but the girls add their input to us, and we continue to grow as a charity, and we're very fortunate to be in a position to help others. So Toby's just run the Manchester Marathon in an incredible time of 3 hours 14 minutes, which is unbelievable. Couldn't believe it. Nick was moaning last week that he was struggling. So I hate to see him what time he would get when he was fit, but that he was short on a few quid for his fundraising. Put that out to the legends on the WhatsApp group, and then suddenly his target goes through the roof. So it's a great family to be involved with, and I think that was really epitomising lockdown. So lockdown was very tough for a lot of people. I had COVID very, very badly, and life-changing for me. But when it all kicked off in March 2020, and we were told to stay at home, that for a lot of people was tough. And every Friday night we got together on our WhatsApp group. We had a drink with each other, and that went all around the world. And we raised something, I think it was 90 grand in lockdown. So wow. just by drinking, effectively, sounds awful. But
sounds great.
Great fun. But after 12 weeks, when your wife sits there and goes, right, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday, go on then, off you go and play with your friends, and you're literally you're doing silly videos and necking a drink and toasting Captain Tom and toasting the club and whatever is going on that week. It was just something that brought everyone together, and even the players now, when they talk about it, and they said if it weren't for that group and that camaraderie, I would have struggled. So that links back to mental health, whether it's whether you're a player coming out from a long career, or struggling in lockdown. So tough.
Fantastic work. So you were 12 years at Class International, and there you started PRS Promotions and BioWell Health. So first of all, what made you want to strike out on your own, and maybe just tell me a little bit about both those companies?
Yeah, totally. What started my my business class in the end was Kenny Logan and myself, but the John O'Connell, who was the chairman of WASPs at the time. He was a very successful person, sold his company for 197 million, I think it was. And I wanted to be like John. So I had a chance meeting with someone, and then I put together Class, which was a network of great companies, and I just introduced great companies to great people. Simple as that. So you'd need car insurance. Today I would introduce you to All Sport Insurance, who are fantastic people based in Torquay. They would sort you out. Now, can they do it cheaper and better? Possibly. If they can't, they'll give you just great advice. That was my job. So that company got bought out by a company called Alpha Solutions, and then for me, COVID hit, and I just wasn't in that position health-wise to go back into the city every single day. So I was in there sort of Monday to Thursday. And so I had to step away, and then I restarted PRS Promotions, which is a business consultancy arm for one, and then the other side of it is my sort of public speaking, which I do a bit of at the minute on rugby and corporate. hosting and auctioneers and stuff like that. So that's where that entity came from. And then BioWell Health is a new entity that is just about to launch. And as I keep saying about COVID took me down in a spectacular fashion.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm fit and healthy. 6 months prior to going down in October 2020, I did Bupa medical, and the doctor just said, look, to be honest, get out. You've just wasted £1,000. And everything was absolutely tip top. COVID hit, and literally, honestly, life changing. And during that period of 2 years, I'm diagnosed on COVID at the minute, and I still struggle. Not hugely, but there's days you think, Christ, I'm just completely wiped out. And I tried absolutely everything to get back to some sort of normality. And the blood tests were all clear. My heart was going at 218 beats a minute, which was quite scary. And that was done by an NHS monitor from my heart surgeon, a guy called Scott Murray, who I'm actually doing an event for as a thank you on Wednesday. He's got a brand new health centre up in Warrington. But I tried everything to get back to a level of normality. And Simon Shaw, who's a great pal of mine, said, "Have you looked at hyperbaric oxygen?" And I said, "Well, what's that?" He goes, "Well, it's just," and he's doing a lot of stuff with a charity called Love of the Game, and you should get Shawsy on your podcast, because it's a fantastic charity that he's looking into concussion into sport, and trying to stop kids coming out of sport due to worries about concussion, rather than that putting the processes in place to keep people in sport. But Shawsey said, "Have you tried hyperbaric oxygen?" No. Anyway, I got in the chamber, and it takes you down at depth, opens up your blood cells, and floods your body with life-preparing oxygen, which has been used by the NHS for hundreds of years. There was a moment that I'm thinking, Christ, I feel a lot better. So BioWell Health, we're putting together a wellness clinic that concentrates on the biohacking world of situations that you can actually improve your health, be the best you can be by using these different things. So cryotherapy is one, hyperbaric oxygen, red light, which is photomodulation, and IV drips and compression. So they're the core elements. But then you look at reflexology, acupuncture, and all the other bits and pieces that go with it. Trust me, I've tried everything, and they're the only things that helped me get back out of that situation I was in. And I still know there's a lot of people still struggling. So for those people that haven't tried hyperbaric oxygen, and you've got long COVID or COVID, especially in children, there's a lot of kids that are struggling at the minute with this as well. Get them into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. The trouble is there aren't many about, so which is why we're setting up this company, and we're going to roll out these clinics across the UK.
And do you have exits for the companies? We
will have. So it's all going through the EIS at the minute, and SEIS, so approval. So that'll be hopefully with us very shortly. The investment rounds will then go out, and we'll look to exit that probably in 5 to 7 years. But we'll see. Right, it may be so successful that we keep it going. But again, it's about helping people and giving everyone the opportunity to be the best they can be. And especially kids with a concussion at the minute. I'm very passionate about that with Simon Shaw, with that Love of the Game charity. Kids with a concussion, they've got nowhere to really go if they get knocked at school in sport. The classic thing that happens in the minute, they get a bang on the head. They go to hospital. They wait 3 or 4 hours, unfortunately, and those symptoms have subsided. So they may go back or get passed to go back into sport, and then another concussion happens, and you've got real problems. So what we're going to be doing with the clinics is anyone that gets concussions within that certain area for schools, they can whiz straight in and get some treatment via our units. So,
and I'm deliberate. We're running out of time, and I want to be respectful of your time. But a question that I want to ask you, and I want you to give a one-word answer, because it's literally another podcast could be talked about this. But currently, when you talk about concussion, do you think, yes or no, that the way that World Rugby is taking the red cards with the hits to the head, do you think that is a good thing or a bad thing?
No, it's good. So what World Rugby are doing with concussion is the right thing to do. They are making some errors, and some, when Jamie George got knocked out recently for England or for Saracens, and he played however many days later, I think that was a poor decision. But what the biggest problem is concussion in schools. So kids in school sport and how they've been treated, and the private schools at the minute they've got some great. I know that Andy Chevalier at Felsted, he's got a fantastic sort of concussion protocol set up there. Whereas other schools right at the other bottom of the spectrum will have nothing, and they're the people that need help, because these kids come out and they do have a serious knock on their head. They have suffered a brain trauma, so it's got to be looked at. You can't just let these kids oh, you're okay, you look okay, give them a slap on the face, on you go again. No, because that's when things happen. So that's definitely a podcast you should look at with Shores, and I'll introduce you to him.
That'd be wonderful.
It's a fantastic charity, what they're trying to do.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely fascinating hearing about your story, about rugby, your thoughts on rugby. I've had an absolute blast. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I really hope you've enjoyed that content. It's a really fascinating interview that I've done there. So please do, if you are enjoying this content, please do give it a like. Please do give a subscribe. It'd be really good to boost the subscriptions. It really makes a difference to the algorithm in YouTube. So thank you for that. If you do hit subscribe, hit the bell icon, and you'll get all of the content. You'll get notified when all the content is available. Thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Thanks a lot.